George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
A record-breaking week for the mother of all talk shows. More than 5 million people watched the shows this week, all or in part 2.2 million of them. A single clip of a telephone call from Oklahoma. Well, if you haven't seen, you better check out. Millions of people are discussing the mother of all talk shows because this is where we discuss the big issues without fear or favor. Not because we're on anybody's payroll, for we are not, but because we say what we believe and we let you say what you believe. And that'll be the same tonight. Although, if you're going to attack me, expect me to attack you back. It's all coming up over the next 2 hours. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night because this is the mother of all talk shows. Stay.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
The murder and mayhem continues, above all in Gaza, but also in Lebanon, also in Syria. I've just been looking at a video, a Gaddafi demise style video, as Bashar al-Assad's cousin, someone called Talal Makhlouf, who was captured, handcuffed, put in the back of a pickup truck and then savagely assailed. His face and head a mask of blood. I don't know the man. I don't know what, if anything, he has done. If you live by the sword, you're going likely to die by the sword. I'm not shedding any tears for any of the remnants of the Bashar al-Assad government. But I just remind you that these moderates are the ones that we are now paying for. Yes, that's right, the hard-pressed British taxpayer is now paying millions upon millions of dollars to the throat-cutting, head-chopping, heart and lung-eating fanatics who are enforcing dress codes on women of a different religion, who have banned Christmas, kicked over Christmas trees, destroyed lights, told Christian churches in the land of Jesus, who speak the language of Jesus, Aramaic, just in case you didn't know, have been told to cancel Christmas. Now, none of you might care about that. Some of you are more interested in the geopolitics. Some of you are more interested in the sectarian dimension of all of this. I'm equally interested in all of it. The statement that I made on Wednesday, which has attracted millions of views and thousands of comments and a wave of hostility from people who either support the sectarianism, which has brought the Arabs low to their lowest ever point in modern times at least, or they are hirelings of the slave governments who rule their countries in the interests of empire. They get funded for academic posts. They get sinecures in state-owned media, as long as they parrot the prevailing orthodoxy, as long as they toe the dictatorship's line. There is a remarkable amount of hypocrisy going around. Really, truly, mind-numbingly, mind-bendingly, incredibly hypocritical. Apparently, dynastic dictatorships are a bad thing. Well, at least they're a bad thing in Syria. They're a good thing in Saudi Arabia, in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in the United Arab Emirates, in Jordan. They're fine there. Dynastic dictatorships are fine, as long as the dynastic dictator polishes the boots of the empire, recycles the God-given petrodollars that have been visited upon their lands and waters through the empire, kicks it back, in other words, in arms sales, in property sales, in the stock markets and in the banks of the empire. Do that and you are fine. There's only one Arab country left standing. Its name is Algeria. And lo and behold, today Algeria accused France of beginning to stir up Islamist opposition to the secular republic in Algeria. I don't know the nuts and bolts of it, and the secular government in Algeria isn't much to write home about, to be sure. But it doesn't lick the boots of the empire. It maintains cordial relations with Russia and with China. The Algerian government says that France has reopened its corridor, formerly quite a busy one, to the Islamist rebels that tore Algeria apart in a civil war in the 1990s. The Algerian state is strong, but then that's what we thought about the Syrian state. So watch that space. It might well become a subject of our debate in due course. But going back to Syria. There is no Syria, of course, anymore. Israel occupies 3 times the territory of the Gaza Strip, now inside Syria, and can take whatever it likes. There may be back-channel discussions between them and the Americans about how far they can go, but the fanatics in the state of Israel have already decided that. They regard Syria as part of Greater Israel. They regard Lebanon and Jordan and parts of Saudi Arabia and parts of Iraq as Greater Israel. That's what the 2 blue parallel lines on the Israeli flag mean. From the Nile to the Euphrates, from the Nile in Egypt to the Euphrates in Egypt. Now, people used to think only cranks in Israel stood for that Greater Israel project, but it's a real thing now. After all, you don't have to physically occupy a government or a territory to rule it, as the good people of both Jordan and Egypt already know. The Saudis, to date, have refused to normalize relations with Israel. But most of their neighbors are slaves of the empire and have normalized those relations. I think of Qatar with its ferocious Al Jazeera television network, as long as the ferocity does not affect the red lines of the empire. Qatar has normal relations with Israel. It owns property in Tel Aviv. The last time I was there, the lift opened in my hotel and the Israeli president, Shimon Peres, walked out of the lift. I was there for the BBC's Doha debates. I've written about this many times before. The United Arab Emirates, ditto. The UAE owns a football team in Israel. Israel has an embassy in the UAE. The Israeli Secret Service, Mossad, roam the length and breadth of the UAE. And while these countries are a little shamefaced about it and don't normally crow about it, others are not so shy. Morocco, for example, on the far west of the Arab world, is the place where the killers from Gaza go for their holidays, for rest and recuperation. So, from the Atlantic to the Persian Gulf, the Arab world is a sea of dictatorship, but only one dictatorship deserves to be brought down, and its dynastic leaders deserve to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. It so happens, entirely coincidentally, it's the only Arab dictatorship that still had the name Arab in the title of its state. It's the only Arab dictatorship that didn't have either open or secret relations with Israel. It's the only Arab dictatorship that allowed the Palestinian resistance to make their base there. It's the only Arab dictatorship that allowed the Palestinian resistance to be armed by the Islamic Republic of Iran, through Iraq, through Syria, into Lebanon and into the hands of the resistance. That may or may not be why it has been overthrown. It may be because they were dynastic. It may be because they were dictatorship. But in that case, it's a little difficult to understand why they, in particular, were singled out. Somebody asked me earlier on social media, what's your view? Why do you ask us to put up with dictatorships as long as they are anti-imperialist? Which is a fair question. It's a fair point. But so is this one. How come you never fight the pro-imperialist dictatorships? How come there's never any jihad in the lands of the Arab dictators who surrendered to Israel long ago, who collaborate with Israel, who belly dance for Israel and for the United States of America? How come you never make any jihads there? That's a fair question, isn't it? Maybe somebody will call us tonight and explain why this particular schizophrenia that afflicts that current, that trend of the Arab world. Now, a lot of people said I should not have washed my hands of 350 million Arabs. Of course, I did not. 2 of my sons are Arabs. In fact, their grandfather's grave in South Lebanon was just desecrated by Israeli invaders just yesterday or the day before. The picture emerged of his grave smashed to pieces and disturbed. His father's grave was even more revoltingly desecrated and could not be shown on the screen. I'm not washing my hands of my own sons. I'm not washing my hands of the thousands, tens of thousands of Arabs who are personal friends of mine. I'm not washing my hands of the good people who've never sold out in the sea of misery that I am describing. People like Dr. Man Bashur and other Nasserist Arab nationalist people, which is the current I have always supported and will always support. I'm not washing my hands of these. Above all, I'm not washing my hands of Palestine. I've told you so many times, if I can arrange it, the last word on my lips will be Palestine. I promised long ago, 50 years ago, that I would never leave the Palestinian cause alone, and it's a promise that I have kept. No, I'm washing my hands of the slave Arabs and their useful idiots, those who know that they are living in the land of the slave Arab rulers, but who nonetheless take the shilling and keep their mouths shut. That's why when they attack me, I have to go looking for who they are, because I never heard of them before. I'm washing my hands of those. I will no longer walk on the same path as you. I'm washing my hands of the sectarians. I've always hated sectarianism. It's just me. I spent so many years in my youth being called a Fenian bastard. I've always hated sectarianism. In Scotland, a mixed marriage is one between 2 white Christians of different denominations. I cannot fathom why, when the Arab world is being looted by imperialism, people would rather suck the boots of the imperial owner of their resources than associate with a Muslim who prays differently, who holds their hand differently in prayer, and has, in the grand scheme of things, minuscule doctrinal differences with them, who believe in the same God, who believe in the same Quran, who believe in confronting Israel and the empire, but you can't work with them because it's more important to you that your own current, within your own sect, within your own religion, within your own country, that's more important to you. So that's fine. That's you. I've worked with you before. I will no longer work with you again. Our paths crossed, and now they have diverged. We were together on Egypt when the dictator Sisi overthrew the elected government there and murdered the elected prime minister there and murdered many hundreds of his supporters in a public square. We were together on that. We were together on Palestine for decades. We went on convoys together over decades to try and break the siege on Gaza. We were together when Tony Blair and George W. Bush invaded and occupied Iraq. But we are no longer together because you expected me, having been your hero for my stand against the invasion of Iraq by the United States and the United Kingdom, to support an invasion by the United States and the United Kingdom of the neighboring country of Syria. And I will not do it. I will be with anyone for good and with no one for ill. And as to what's good, as to what is ill, only our own consciences can dictate that. And we'll all face the judgment day, and we'll all have to answer for what we did. So I'm concentrating now on the home front, on my job as the leader of the Workers' Party of Britain. And above all, I'm concentrating on trying to avoid my own country being the main driver of World War III against Russia. So you'll see me, after this kerfuffle is finally over, much more often speaking about British, American, and NATO matters in relation to the Russian front. And that's my judgment. That's my decision. I have limited time left, and I've decided that I want to spend that time concentrating on other things. For all those who insulted me, called me a white savior, having white savior complex. Well, first of all, I don't really pass as white. If you were to go out into this country and ask the racists how white I am, you'd discover most of them don't consider me white at all. Neither am I a savior. It was my job over 50 years to give solidarity to the Arab cause, to try and build a base in Western countries that would support that Arab cause. And I never asked for any thanks for it. You don't owe me anything for it. I did it because I believed it was my duty. But I never did get anything from it. Some people say I did it for votes. Have you any idea how hard it is to be a supporter of the Palestinian resistance in Western countries? Have you any idea how powerful Israel is in British and American politics? Have you any idea? I could show you my scars, literally my scars, except they're covered by this hat, inflicted by somebody wearing an Israeli army insignia in a London street when I was a member of Parliament. If he'd had a weapon, I wouldn't be here now. I'd be dead. Like Rachel Corrie is dead. Like Tom Herndl is dead. You get dead for supporting the Arab cause in Western countries. You lose your job, as many have in the United States and Britain, for their brave efforts during the last 14 months on university campuses and in downtown demonstrations all over the Western world. Lost their jobs, got shadow banned, strangled, cut off, deplatformed. That's what you get in the West for supporting the Arab cause. Or like Richard Medhurst, like Craig Murray, like Kit Clarenberg, you get arrested at British airports and put in handcuffs and charged with terrorism. You get the police all over your case. You get them reading your emails. You get them reading your tweets. Whole sections of the security apparatus dedicated to surveillance upon them. That's what you get for supporting the Arabs in the West. So don't dare ever accuse me of having stood where I stood for personal benefit. Because I tell you something, in all modesty, if I had supported Israel rather than Palestine, I would not now be a superannuated former backbench member of Parliament. I could have gone far, you know, but I chose the side my conscience told me to choose. Now, finally, because I don't have a clock this evening and I realize I've gone over my time, finally, the two guests that we have today, Syrian Girl and Chris Hedges, are of such quality and such importance that you really should pay attention to them. Neither of them, nor myself, are Shiites or Iranians or Iranian agents or any of the other filth that is out there on the internet. We're just three people who saw the cause of Palestine and felt that it was our duty to support it. And support it. All three of us always shall. Stay tuned. Syrian Girl is up next. Stay tuned. I defy anyone to contradict the point that I just made, that every person alive today was born of woman. So why would we say that the people in the labor wards, in the maternity units, are people who are giving birth? Why can't we say women? Why can't we say mothers? Why can't we say women who are breastfeeding, mothers who are breastfeeding? Why do we need to say people who are chest feeding? All of these words, and indeed all of the trend that you say you dissociate yourself from, of transgenderism, transmania, I call it, are all taking rights away from women.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So we've got a poll running. Will Israel attack Iran in 2025? Is the Pope a Catholic? Do bears defecate in the wood? Yes or no? You can answer on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway. You can vote on my X, my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. It is not exactly a close run thing, but a bit closer than some recent polls. So have your say. 22,500 of you have voted already. Will Israel attack Iran in 2025. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. And in the United Kingdom and Ireland, it's free of charge, 08081 965522. And the international number is 0044203 966 2625. Get voting, why don't you? Syrian Girl has emerged over the last years as a very formidable geopolitical analyst and journalist, and a hate figure to all the worst people in the world. That's why I'm glad she's with us on the mother of all talk shows. Ma'am, these are difficult times. My condolences to you for the strife and trouble in your country. Perhaps you'd bring us first up to date by how the first week of rule by ISIS and Al-Qaeda in their new clothes, styled by Savile Row. How is that looking to you?
Well, as you could see, Syria has lost its entire air force, its army, its navy, its strategic defense weapons. Israel has invaded Syria and is taking more and more and more territory. They're bombing. They've done like over 400 sorties over Damascus. In the meantime, the revolutionaries run by the head chopper-in-chief, Golani, have been celebrating while this happens and vow not to do anything about Israel, and in fact concentrate on their efforts into attacking minority groups. I've seen people be beaten in the streets, people get shot, churches get looted, and this is the priority for these people. This is the so-called true vanguard, as they think of themselves, for the Palestinian cause. These people, I think, I just want to say, George, I did hear what you have to say. You're absolutely right about everything you've said. I mean, there's people inside, Syria as well that are thinking, what is the point of supporting this when you have some of these people are essentially attacking themselves and benefiting Israel. Over the last 13 months, we've witnessed the most horrific genocide in history perpetrated by Israel on Gaza. And all of these people, and as a Sunni I say these, all of these people would rather kill Shias than do anything to stop Israel from committing that genocide. And it's disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting.
Is that because it's easier for them to kill Shiites, either literally or as keyboard warriors on the screen? Or is it genuinely the case that they never really cared about Palestine in the first place? After all, if they did, how could you celebrate making Israel stronger? How can you celebrate making the Palestinian resistance weaker? Unable to resupply itself, unable to receive fresh ammunition, unable to receive money from the one place where they were getting all three throughout this struggle.
Well, there's a fellow called Muhammad Hijab who styles himself as one of the heads voices for these Salafist type individuals, and he came out and said that he views Assad as worse than Netanyahu. So it just goes to show you the kind of mentality that these people have. They do not value the Palestinian cause. They have sold Syria to Israel in order to take power. And what I want to point out very clearly to everybody here is that Israel is going to war with the people of the Levant. It's Syria, it's Lebanon, and it's Palestine that are being occupied and slaughtered. And the majority of these people that are coming to save us, are not actually white, but they're from all over the Central Asian nations, Uzbeks, Turkmens, Pakistan, also some of the Gulf Arab states are included in this. And they do not understand our people. They do not understand our history, and they do not care. They honestly do not care. And I've heard them say that Chinese Uyghurs have more right to own property in Syria because they fought for it. So what does that sound like to you? They are Muslim Zionists. In the same way that Israel is the Jewish ISIS, these people are Muslim Zionists. They want to steal our land and they want to kill us, and they don't give a crap if they're sharing with Israel. That's the reality of the people we're facing. And they're not necessarily even Arab, you know? We, the people of the Levant, historically, we spoke Aramaic. We, adopted the pan-Arab ideology. And unfortunately, the Arabs that have helped us so far, God bless them, are the Houthis, the Iraqis. So, you know, unfortunately, that we can no longer expect very much from them, because instead of helping us, the majority of them have actually betrayed us to Israel. And Saudi Arabia is part of that, because just before October 7th happened, they were about to normalize with Israel. And the UAE was the first step into that experiment. So I'm sorry, but these people are the ones that are celebrating democracy in Syria. Qatar doesn't even have a democracy in Syria. It was the one funding, Qatar doesn't even have a democracy in their own nation. And they're the ones that have been funding this, essentially, this Turco-Mongol invasion of Syria.
I went to China with President Arafat 40 years ago, and the Chinese leadership said this to him: the Arabs are not serious about liberating Palestine. If they were, they could all just walk there. Israel does not have enough bullets to stop them. They could take it by simply walking into it. Arafat was very offended by it. But it is abundantly clear by now, isn't it, that these countries that have normalized relations with Israel, these countries which are collaborating in the genocide with Israel, are not only uninterested in the liberation of Palestine, they are against the liberation of Palestine. And this week we saw the Mahmoud Abbas military forces shooting dead teenagers in Jenin. I saw it myself. Now, I have never attacked them in this way before, but I will from henceforth. When I see Mahmoud Abbas, that I've known for 40 years, his gunmen killing children in Jenin, to assist Israel in guaranteeing its security, I'm afraid all bets are off from me. How do you feel about it?
You know, it's clear that there's this drive now to push us away from using violence as a means of resistance. And the people that are doing it to us are treasonous to the highest order. As you said, the PA are doing this in the West Bank, but also the treason revolution, the traitors that have taken over Syria alongside their Uyghur terrorists from China and the Turkmens, etc. The ones who have invaded Syria, they have also cut off armament supplies to Hezbollah. So essentially, they are preventing us from defending ourselves against Israel. And they're not lifting a finger and allowing Israel to steamroll all through Syria. And when you point this out to them, they say, "Oh, you want us to commit suicide by attacking Israel?" It's ironic that these are the same people that would criticize the Syrian state under Hafiz al-Assad and Bashar al-Assad for not going to war against Israel in the Golan Heights, right? Even though back then Israel was kept at bay and wasn't expanding, and Syria was able to defend its airspace. They were able to shoot down an Israeli jet in 2018. They fired a missile at the Dimona nuclear reactor, but that is something they still criticize, and yet they're literally selling Syrian land to Israel in exchange for power. and they're not lifting a finger or anything about it. And their excuses, well, that would be committing suicide. So the hypocrisy is clear.
I didn't think that people with their mentality had this concept of suicide. I thought that fighting Israel for Palestine would not be suicide. It would be something different and would lift you straight to heaven. So how can they say, well, you want us to commit suicide? So it's suicide now to try and liberate Jerusalem?
Yeah, I mean, these are the same people that basically death marched and death rushed into Russian and Syrian fighter jets bombing them. That was okay. That was martyrdom for the cause, you know. That for that time, their deaths was not suicide. That was you know, doing like having shahada. But if it comes to Israel, okay, that's when they stop. That's when the Uyghurs from China and the Turkmens decide, you know what, we're going to go home and attack our own countries. Literally, the Chinese Uyghurs declared that they're going to go back to Xinjiang province and cut off China from the Silk Road, the Belt and Road Initiative. But, you know, that's not suicide. That's not suicide. You know, it's funny, as you say, you know, you could have walked right in. At the moment, these people, you know, they haven't really, they basically spent 13 years undermining the Syrian state with sanctions. And what I want to also point out is that the Syrian military didn't actually get defeated by these people. They were told to retreat. They were ordered to retreat and surrender. You know, people were willing, the Syrian people were willing to fight. Okay, we've been fighting for this cause for 13 years because we know it's about Palestine. And it's not just about Palestine, it's about Syria. It's about opposing Zionism. And we know that these people are going to hand us over on a silver platter to Israel, because look at the people who are behind them. It's the United States, it's the CIA, it's Project Timber Sycamore, it's the UK, it's the normalizer states in the Gulf Arab states, and it's Turkey. Turkey that makes the shoes that the Israeli military wears and has done for years. Erdogan, who claims that he doesn't do trade deals with Israel, who's selling them oil. I mean, what has he done to stop the Israeli invasion of Syria? He talks about how he's a part of NATO and is going to be the new Ottoman Empire. Why hasn't he done anything about the invasion of Syria by Israel? You know, you could spend 13 years to destroy one of the only states that is actually giving armaments to the resistance that fights Israel. You can do that, and for you, that's Islam, right? That's Islam for you. But when it comes to actually doing a single thing to not only like try to stop the spread of Israel into Syria, but maybe do even a symbolic thing to stop the genocide in Gaza that's ongoing, and they won't do that. That would be suicide, right? So the hypocrisy is at least this has exposed the hypocrisy of these people, because God does not love these people. He hates them.
I've been doing a lot of intensive rereading of Sykes-Picot. In fact, my wife far more intensively than me. She's becoming an expert on the subject. How much of this is traceable back to the Anglo-French betrayal of the Arabs 100 years ago? We were looking at the map of the actual Syria, not the Sykes-Picot truncated Syria that existed before last week. It's now even more truncated and more small. But of course, Syria was not just what we know as Syria, but Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine too. It's no accident, is it, that Sykes and Picot were betraying the Arabs with false promises of an Arab independence and statehood if they supported the Allies rather than the Ottomans. And at the same time, we're giving Palestine away in the Balfour Declaration. These things are all linked, aren't they?
You know, history is bound to repeat when you don't learn from it. In 1920, the Syrians, after overthrowing the Ottoman Empire, because they were tricked by Lawrence of Arabia, they essentially declared independence, as you said, with Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria as one state. Which, you know, this region has always been Bilad al-Sham. It's always been connected. But the French and the British invaded, and they divided, they conquered, and they created Israel. And Turkey was actually one of the first nations to recognize the state of Israel at that time. And they also took a piece of Syria, Hatay province, that they haven't returned. So it's essentially the same thing. You know, they came in saying, we're going to give you democracy, we're going to give you independence from the Assad regime. And what are we getting? We're getting Al-Qaeda, Golani, as the de facto leader of Syria. Who knows? Abu Muhammad al-Julani is not even his real name. That's his Al-Qaeda name, by the way. It's interesting that they chose the name Jolani, because what he ended up doing is handing the Jolan to Israel. So probably that's by design. They're trying to carve out a Kurdish state east of the Euphrates. The Israelis are trying to carve out a Druze state in the south, and they're hoping also to cut the rest of Syria off from the coastal region and make it a landlocked country, which actually was what the Balfour, the Sykes-Picot people were wanting to do to Syria, but what we fought against all those years ago. And it's the same thing, really. They were tricked, they were fooled into accepting this freedom, and what ends up happening is Syria is getting balkanized, and all of its defenses and everything that has been built since the day of independence has been destroyed. And you know, we're actually maybe doing them a kindness by saying that they've been fooled, because I do think that some of them are just truly evil, and they know that this is the case, but they are honestly choosing to destroy the Levant for the sake of Israel, because for them it's about power and control, and that's it.
Thank you very much indeed for your heartfelt testimony of your country's travails. Thank you, Syrian Girl. Follow her on social media. She's very effervescent and you could say energetic commentator on events in the region and far beyond, I should say. Let me take a quick break and then I'll be back with your comments and calls. And in the second hour, we have got the master himself, Chris Hedges. In a sane world, he'd be in the White House come January, but the world ain't sane. In case you hadn't noticed, I'll be right back. Stay tuned.
As the green smoke rose, their faces flashed out, pallid green, and faded again as it vanished. Then slowly the hissing passed into a humming, into a long, loud, droning noise. Suddenly, a humped shape rose out of the pit, and the ghost of a beam of light seemed to flicker out after it. Forthwith, flashes of actual flame, a bright glare leaping from one to another, sprang from the scattered group of men. It was as if some invisible jet impinged upon them and flashed into white flame. It was as if each man were suddenly and momentarily turned to fire.
You get that reading and much else on my Patreon, which is the best way that you can support the mother of all talk shows. 5 million watched us last week. Imagine if we could raise a cent from every one of those. We could have the MOATS on every night of the week. Not presented by me, I should quickly add, but we could have a MOATS every night of the week. If that 5 million would pay 1 cent for the show that they watched and presumably found useful. So the best way to support us is on my Patreon page. So it's patreon.com/George Galloway. But you can also donate straight to the show by using Super Chat if you are watching on YouTube. And you can also go to our website. A big hello, by the way, if you're watching us on TikTok tonight. Over 30,000 likes on the stream so far. Keep tapping the screen. Don't forget to follow us on TikTok and like the live stream. Search for George Galloway Official. Trevor in Cambridgeshire in England wants to talk about Syria and Russia. And he's on line 1 and he's now on the air. Trevor, what do you want to say, sir?
Oh, good evening, George. And first of all, thank you very much for taking my call. And I consider it a true privilege to talk to you on such an important and vital truth channel. My question to you is, most of your audience will know that Syria is one of the 7 countries listed for imperial takeover by the US-led war enterprise machine, as General Wesley Clark laid it out in his interview following the September 11th attacks in the US. So Syria being one of those countries that include obviously Iran, Iraq, Somalia, Lebanon, Sudan and Libya and Syria, of course. Syria being so important strategically to Russia, I think they've taken a tactical retreat from Syria to concentrate on finishing off Ukraine. And I think they feel compelled to go back into Syria because it's so important, because of their bases and their access to the Mediterranean Sea, and obviously it's a sort of southern entrance towards Russia itself. So I think it's strategically important. I was wondering what you think about that.
Well, it's of course speculation on my part. I haven't spoken to anyone from Russia about it, or at least they haven't spoken to me. I've reached out to people I normally talk to see what's, rattling on the Russian scene. My principal contact that I would normally expect some guidance from answered, "I'm lost for words," and I haven't heard from him since. So I don't actually know what they're up to. I don't actually know why they did what they did. I know that they have emerged, for the moment, with their naval and air force bases intact, although, as I said right at the beginning, that's an agreement not worth the paper it's not written on, because at any moment these bases could be overrun, could come under attack in the way that US bases in Iraq, for example, are regularly attacked. The Syrian state could ask for them to leave, demand that they leave. The NATO powers could force their clients in power now in Damascus to do just that. So Russia's long-term presence in Syria must be in very grave doubt. I'm sure they've got other ports that they can use as their entree into the Mediterranean, though they undoubtedly would not be as useful to them as Tartus on the coast of Syria has always been. I do think that Russia is finishing the Ukraine war in a very strong fashion, surrenders every day, captures of territory every day. I'm not sure the Ukrainian regime will last until January the 20th, but if it does, then I'm sure that Trump is going to tell them to draw stumps and Zelensky to come and enjoy his retirement homes in Florida, in Tel Aviv and elsewhere. But the world is in flux, no doubt about it, Trevor, and it isn't over yet. Netanyahu seems, according to the Israeli media, to be readying himself for a very significant attack on Iran, which Iran presumably will respond to in a very significant way. So this, in a way, the Syrian show may turn out to be a sideshow to the big event, which has not yet happened. Now, if you want to make comments, if you're watching on YouTube, scan the QR code now and leave a comment on the YouTube stream. YA has done that. As a Muslim, I have realized not a single Muslim country is a real country. They are all fake, just like the African leaders. Keep exposing them. Thank you for that. Elvis! You thought he was gone. He's in the building. He just sent us £10 for the show. Those idiots celebrating in Syria will soon regret it. Hate him all you want. President Bashar al-Assad was secular. I don't understand some Palestine movements anymore supporting HTS. God bless you, George. Well, I have no relations at all with either of the two main political forces in the Palestinian arena. I haven't actually for some time, but now they are well and truly broken. I'm a supporter of the political prisoner, Palestine's Nelson Mandela. His name is Marwan al-Barghouti. He is the last hope for the Palestinian people. That's why he's in an Israeli dungeon. Michael Crystal says it must be difficult to give unconditional support to Arabs when Arabs themselves are busy shitting all over each other. Michael, if it was only shitting rather than shooting, it would be tolerable. But when they are far more interested in killing each other than in fighting to raise the siege on Gaza, stop the genocide in Gaza, it's impossible to be associated with. EM is saying, no one is saying Assad was ideal, yet shouldn't there be a Syrian running Syria, not someone from Saudi Arabia with a bounty? Well, I don't know. I mean, he was born in Saudi Arabia, according to such records as exist, but that doesn't make him a Saudi. My sons were born in England, but that doesn't make them English. A dog born in a stable doesn't become a horse. I'm willing to accept at face value that his actual home, his origin, was the Golan, but I've yet to see his birth certificate, as they said in the Barack Obama case. Dennis is in Texas on Syria. Let's hear from him. Dennis, what would you like to say?
Hi, George, and thanks for taking the call. 2 points I'd like to try to make. America and satrapies has been pulling out all the stops since the early 1990s, of course, to cement the total global hegemony. And the only two possible states capable of stopping that, Russia and China, they have not been pulling out all the stops. Especially recently when Russia began to respond, they respond always reactively. It's always reactive and not proactive. And I do not understand that.
Perhaps go on. Finish your point, Dennis.
Well, it's a long point. I'm sorry, it's not too long. But I'm very disappointed that people like Borka Almasian and John Mearsheimer are bending over backwards to put the blame for the loss of Syria on al-Assad. And I blame 100% Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. This is because, for example, John Mearsheimer said interviewed by, on RT, that al-Assad refused to take Putin's advice to sort out corruption, especially in the Syrian military, where the soldiers were getting paid $5 a month, apparently, whereas the terrorists in Idlib were getting paid $2,000 a month. Okay. Well, with that kind of level, someone like China could have come in to make sure that there could be. How do you avoid corruption when your life might depend on being corrupt to get enough food and support for your family? I think they were asking al-Assad to do the impossible. Putin asked him to sort out the corruption in the military elsewhere, and Mearsheimer criticised, said that Assad was stupid for not taking that advice. I don't see how that taking that advice was even possible. When America is stealing your oil, America is stealing your wheat. Basically, I don't know how much, 80% of your GDP, whatever percentage it is. How on earth do you avoid corruption? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you can't.
You make some good points there, Dennis. The answer to them is not yet clear. All will be clear in due course. And no doubt blame has to be shared around. But the Assad family definitely weren't living on $40 a month. I don't know how much they are worth, but it's almost certainly billions and not millions. And they may put it to good use from their exile, or they may not. But the level of corruption at the top of the Assad regime was very considerable indeed. And so the fish rots from the head down. And so you can hardly blame the officer corps for being corrupt if the political leadership in the country was also corrupt. It's obvious to me that the military tops, certainly in Aleppo, almost certainly also in Homs, had taken a dive. In boxing parlance, you'll know, a dive is where you're paid to go down and not seriously contest the fight. I'm in no doubt that that's what happened. I'm in no doubt also that there will be many soldiers, particularly from the minority communities, ethnic and religious minority communities, who would prefer to have fought and who may yet fight. There are some reports of nascent clusters of guerrilla fighters from the army, particularly from the Alawiyin, the Alawite religious minority that are on the lam with their weapons, and we'll have to watch that story if it develops. Iran is certainly predicting that the President Putin definitely isn't Nikita Khrushchev, who was a clown, in my opinion. Neither is he Stalin, but he's much closer to Stalin than any other Russian leader has ever been. He has a mind that calamity has hardened and turned to steel. He is extremely cautious, but cautious only for a purpose. He is cautious in the hope that the goals of the operation that he's involved the country in can be achieved. But no one should mistake that caution for weakness. I've met the man. 3 times I've met him. I've met lots of leaders. I've met leaders from all over the world, including all of the British leaders that I sat in Parliament under. Vladimir Putin is a very determined guy. He has a clear set of goals. He told you about them in 2007 in Munich. He warned you in 2007 that Russia regarded NATO encroachment in Ukraine as a red line matter. for the existential survival of the Russian Federation, which it is his job to defend, and nobody should make the mistake of thinking that he will not do that job. People misunderestimated Stalin, but Stalin wasn't Stalin when he told the beast of Berlin that we will crush you in your lair. Stalin wasn't Stalin. Putin isn't Stalin. Trust me on that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
My apologies for that. I don't know what happened. It could be the UFO phenomenon, which is now apparently cascading around the world. I've got someone looking out the window right now to see how we were so rudely interrupted. Please forgive me. Will Israel attack Iran in 2025? Almost 30,000 people have voted so far, and it's about 75% yes on average. But get voting. You've still got 45 minutes to do so. Now, the podcast is increasingly important to us. Well, this week, in addition to all the figures I gave you, on Wednesday we're in the top 30 in South Africa, Hong Kong, Australia and Ireland. And we're in the top 5 in Egypt, Singapore and Slovenia just this past week. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen right now. You can also listen to the weekly podcast via the MOATS.tv website. Let's take a call from London town, where Hoz wants to talk about the Syrian Girl. Go ahead, Hoz. What do you want to say?
I just wanted to say that I am really happy that you had her on the show. I think she's someone who I wish no one else has got to be in her shoes. She's just seen her country fall to pieces, and she mentioned the only 2 countries that are helping her are Yemen and Iraq. And all I wanted to say to her was, Lebanon has paid a blood price on behalf of Palestine and on behalf of Syria, and not only now but in the past as well. It's helped out to stop the problems that Syria's got. So it was only to point out that one thing, that the Lebanese people have paid a huge price, and I don't think we should belittle that.
Sure,
because in this last year,
not all Lebanese people, not all the Lebanese people, of course, but a very large number of them have been paying a very high price for 75 years in terms of their absorption of the Palestinian refugee problem, civil wars and mayhem, and regular Israeli invasion and bombardment. You may have seen earlier, I showed my former father-in-law's grave desecrated by the Israeli invaders, and just photographed and sent to me over the last couple of days. That's the grave. I don't know if it was the religious typography, the Arabic writing, what it was that enraged them, but they burst open the coffin and disturbed the remains, I'm sorry to say. Hope my... Let's hear from Mehdi. Go ahead, sir.
Hello, George. Thank you very much for taking my call. This is such an honor, because one thing I want to tell you is in 2003, I thought that you, I'll say it, I thought you were a prattling liberal idiot. 20 years later, I'm here honored to speak to you, to say live on air, I'm sorry, I should have listened to you back then. You're bringing the truth to what's going on out there, and one of the things is U.S. policy whatever it is now is our government. The problem is that it's run by people with absolutely no honor. They have no shame in what they will do to accomplish what they want. And I really think part of what's going on, that's driving what's going on in Ukraine, is that it's the possibility of all the corruption that it will uncover that has happened there with the influence of our country and NATO since 2014.
Yeah, you spoke extremely powerfully and very graciously, and I'm grateful for it. But you put your finger on, I think, something that's been in the back of my mind for a while. I grew up in a time, indeed I sat in Parliament for almost 30 years, during a time when there were certain standards. There were double standards, of course, and there was a great deal of hypocrisy, but the ruling elite had standards that they tried to keep up. Nowadays, that facade has been torn asunder. Now they're not even pretending to be honorable gentlemen and ladies. Now they're no longer pretending that their institutions, their great departments and ministries are in anything to do with contemporary politics other than an arm of the ruling party. My last word, Mehdi, I ain't no liberal, bruv. I wasn't back in 2003, and I ain't any more liberal today.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Again, as I was saying before, we were rudely interrupted by unidentified flying electronic interference. It's the one and only Chris Hedges up now on the mother of all talk shows. Chris, it's been a momentous week. We haven't had the opportunity to speak, you and I, about it. What's your overall takeaway? What happened? Why? And what's the wherefore?
Well, the project to overthrow the Assad regime was decades in the making. It was a slow strangulation of the Assad regime on behalf primarily of Israel, because, of course, as you have pointed out many times, Syria was the pipeline that kept certainly Hezbollah and much of the Palestinian resistance movement armed and funded. This was a goal. That's why Netanyahu rejoiced when the Assad regime was overthrown. The seizure of the oil fields in the north and the east, as well as the agricultural rich region, plunged the Syrian economy into crippling dysfunction. Before Assad was overthrown, in the weeks before, even Damascus was only getting about an hour of electricity every day. Food prices were staggering, high unemployment. So, the regime was corrupt and its human rights abuses were real. But at the same time, this was a Zionist project long in the making, and that's why the Israelis have not only embraced the fall of the Assad regime, but then used it to seize sections of the Golan Heights, including Mount Hermon, this buffer zone, putting their tanks very close to Damascus, and then carried out a series of bombings to denude or destroy the military apparatus in Syria, naval bases, air bases, army bases, essentially crippling the country, not just economically, but militarily. I see shades, I don't know what you feel, of what happened in Libya. And I worked in Syria under Hafez al-Assad. I don't want to pretend it was a flourishing democracy. At the same time, I see what's happening as probably catastrophic for the Palestinians and for the region. It is emboldening Israel because, of course, the next piece on the chessboard for the Zionist government is Iran.
Yeah, we'll come to that. But staying with Syria for a moment, If the Syrian state was as hollowed out by sanctions and attrition as you describe, its allies must have known that. Now, some of its allies are exceedingly rich. Others are exceedingly energy rich. It seems to me inconceivable that Syria could not have had all the oil that God could have gotten them, all the money that was needed to pay their officers properly so that they could not be suborned. Syria is a small population. China, Russia, Iran are rich, oil and gas rich. Why was the Syrian state, therefore, allowed to atrophy to the point that it could be pushed over quite so easily and at such great cost to those allies who might well have realized now that a stitch in time saves 9?
Well, it's because the Gulf states reached out to Bashar al-Assad and told him that if he kept Russia and China and Iran at a distance, he could be reincorporated into the kind of U.S.-Israeli hegemony that dominates most of the Middle East. And unfortunately, Bashar al-Assad, who was not his father, for whatever you say about his father, he was very astute, although he did throw me out of the country and blacklist me for my reporting. But nevertheless, that was an Assad decision. And that was what frustrated his allies, and particularly Russia, which was really willing to rebuild the military. Remember, even up until the last few days, I don't know how extensive they were. There were Russian airstrikes, but that was the Assad who lived in his own version of the Forbidden City, surrounded by exceedingly corrupt elites, and his wife apparently was one of the worst. Amassed anywhere, we don't know, $1 to $2 billion in personal wealth, and that was an Assad decision, as I understand it.
Now, the ontology is important, and it's easy to toss around descriptions of people, but let's try as far as we can. You're the expert, former Middle East Bureau Chief of the New York Times, author, and I know a bit about the neighborhood also. This group, $10 million bounty from the United States government, wanted as a decapitator, a beheader, an Al-Qaeda and ISIS leader. I mean, there was once a zoo in Timbuktu where a leopard changed its spots. Has Golani changed his spots? What's the justification for believing that?
Well, there isn't any. I mean, of course he hasn't changed his spots. He's just more astute about consolidating power than some of his predecessors. But if you look at the most recent report by the Syrian Network for Human Rights, they go back and look at the areas that HTS and Golani controlled, and critics were not only censored and shut down, but arrested, tortured, and disappeared. This was the method by which they retained total control in the areas they controlled outside of Aleppo and everywhere else. So, no, it hasn't changed its spots. I think this is the one thing that mystifies me is the rejoicing by the Israeli regime. Yes, in the short term, it is very good for Israel in that, of course, as I said, it shuts down that pipeline. Israel has now decimated whatever military, acumen or facilities that might potentially pose some kind of a threat to Israel, but actually never pose much of a threat to Israel. But in the long term, I don't see how having an Islamist state on your border is going to be beneficial to the Israeli government. And now we've heard all these reports that they want to be friendly with Israel. Israel, of course, helped fund the project to overthrow Assad. Israel is also funding the Kurds, who control the oil fields, and Turkey, which is the main backer of HTS, is determined to wipe out that Kurdish enclave because they see it as allied with the PKK. So that is immediately going to create a confrontation, at the very least, between the Turks and the Israelis. And then there are 900 U.S. troops there, of course, and I think there's about 50,000 ISIS in their prisons. So, I mean, it reminds me very much of the kind of brutal mechanisms by which we use to invade and occupy Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. And there's always, in that initial first few weeks, that flush of excitement and that promise of victory and all this kind of stuff, none of which pans out. I don't see how that's going to be any different in Syria. I think it's catastrophic what's happened.
So these ISIS prisoners in the Kurdish dungeons will soon be out, and if we're lucky, they'll stay in Syria. If we're unlucky, they might be coming to a shopping mall or a Christmas market near us. Time will tell. Now, one of the most obvious things that you've drawn attention to is the interruption at best, probably destruction at worst, of the transmission belt for the weaponry relied on by the resistance in Lebanon and ultimately inside Palestine itself, including in the West Bank. No one else is going to do that. No one else either can do it, or if they could do it, would do it. Does this open the possibility that the Palestinian armed struggle, now 65 years old, will have to come to an end, and that other forms of struggle, the so-called Gandhian mass social movement type, Gandhi-type campaign of nonviolence will have to take its place? And if so, how is that likely to work with the current Israeli state?
Well, if you look back through the history of the resistance, the Zionists have always attacked the nonviolent movements with more ferocity, even more ferocity than the violent movements, because that poses a threat. The Great March of Return would be the most recent example, but there are many others throughout Palestinian history. So no, it's the Zionist state that has determined the nature of the resistance and the radicalism of the resistance. When I first got to Israel, they were dealing with Faisal Husseini and King Hussein, two extremely moderate conservative figures, really, in the end. And of course, they marginalized, in the case of Husseini, and Hussein reoccupied the West Bank, etc. Then they dealt with Arafat. Arafat wasn't pliant enough for them, and so I think they probably murdered him. There's strong evidence that he was poisoned to death. I mean, that's a strong assumption among many of us. He certainly left under house arrest in Ramallah, and etc. And then they essentially created Hamas. And when I first worked in Gaza, which was in the late 80s, Hamas was an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. I knew one of the founders of Hamas, Dr. Abdelaziz Rantisi, highly educated pediatrician, educated first in his class at the University of Alexandria in Egypt. Then you saw, just like you saw the rise of Hezbollah with the Israeli invasion in 82, that intifada and the selling out, we can never forget that, the selling out by the PLO of the Palestinians on the issue of the right of return, because 75% of the people in Gaza are either refugees or descendants of refugees from the Nakba in 1948, when 750,000 Palestinians were ethnically cleansed from Israel, and thousands were, of course, murdered in massacres. And so it's always Israel that essentially creates the nature of the opposition. And there's no going back now to a Gandhian, peaceful. We've been through that, and the Zionists have made it clear that that's why they've exerted so much energy to destroy the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement, where you can't even now on universities in the United States, perhaps in the UK, have just become academic gulags. You can't even go to a library silently and flip up your laptop with a Free Palestine sticker on the back. You're banned from this. Happened at Harvard, where I went to school. It's happened. So they've shut down any kind of dissent, not just internally, of course, peaceful dissent, but solidarity. I mean, the rules that have been imposed, not only can you not have encampments, you can't do flyering. Students and faculty, 2 NYU professors were arrested the other day. I spent a lot of time at Princeton, where I've taught. I'm not teaching there now, but I'm still there at the university, which is just up the street. And these kind of rules that have been imposed are not going to go away after the genocide ends, whenever that is. And that's very frightening, because we know that with the rise of a kind of totalitarian system, the last readout of free expression, we're not even going to get off on what's happened in the media, but the last readout of free expression is usually on the university campus. It doesn't exist anymore. So no, it ebbs and flows, the resistance movements. Of course, they've taken a hit, just like Hezbollah has taken a hit, but they're not going away. And Israel has now massively traumatized an entire new generation of Palestinians. Remember, half of the 2.3 million people in Gaza are under the age of 18. And Rantisi, his radicalization occurred in 1956. He was a 10-year-old boy. The Israelis occupied Gaza for 100 days, and his uncle and the neighbors and others were lined up on walls in Han Yunis and just shot in cold blood by Ariel Sharon and Force 101 and other Israeli units. And he watched it, and he realized that the goal of the Zionist was his eradication, the erasure and eradication of Palestinian people. And he's not wrong, of course. And he entered in the Brotherhood and later was one of the founders with Sheikh Yassin of Hamas. And he was assassinated, by the way, by the Israelis in 2004, along with his son. And his wife, who I also knew, was targeted and killed very shortly after October 7th.
The Iranian track that I said we'd come back to, the Israeli media says that Israel is going to attack Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran's nuclear facilities, unless the leaders in Iran are fools, are presumably already in overdrive, turning their enriched uranium into nuclear tips for their ballistic missiles. So we're not out of the woods yet of the wider regional war, are we? That might turn the Syria thing into a sideshow.
Yeah, although I want to make it clear that the Israelis will have a very tough time breaching the air defense system, much of it Russian, which is superior, by the way, to NATO anti-aircraft facilities. Will have a very hard time breaching that system. That's why they want to pull the United States into a conflict of sustained aerial bombing of Iran. And we saw it, and you were outspoken about it, about the sanctions in Iraq and the continuous bombing campaign in Iraq. They want a very similar kind of campaign carried out against Iran, but they don't want to lose their planes. And so they need to entice, seduce, push, whatever, the United States into joining them in an aerial assault on Iran because of the formidable, and there are layers of this air defense system. The Iranian Air Force is not much of a threat. Many of the planes are outdated, dating all the way back to the Shah, but the air defense system is good. And so that is why, and if they have to create an incident, whatever they have to do, the Israelis have been trying for years and years to promulgate this. I think it would be catastrophic, and I think ultimately we wouldn't win, and I think that it may even jeopardize the existence of Israel itself. But you have to look at everything that's happened in the last couple of months. The decimation of Gaza, the attempt, they're very close to occupying northern Gaza, the crippling blows they have been able to deliver to the Hezbollah leadership, not, by the way, militarily, because in the south, they haven't gotten in very far to Lebanon. They've taken apparently very high casualties. People are talking in the thousands, many of them with crippling wounds, because it's everything is short. I mean, that's the other thing, is all of these distances are by car. If you could drive through the checkpoints and over the land barriers, I think Lebanon to Damascus is only a couple hours. So they can helicopter, medevac these grievously wounded soldiers back. But there's a limit. Israel's a small country. There's clear signs that the IDF is exhausting its manpower and its resources. Of course, it's sustained completely at this point off of U.S. munitions. They've depleted their own stockpiles. But yeah, that's what they want. And Syria could be a sideshow. The big question for me is whether they would try and put ground troops into Iran. Iran's about the size of Europe, has about 90. I can't believe they're that stupid, but who knows? But yes, that's what the Israeli government is pushing for, but they will not do it without the U.S. because of the formidable air defense system that they have to neutralize.
But Donald Trump's an easily seduced kind of guy, isn't he?
Yeah, anything Israel wants. People ask me what's the difference between Trump and Biden. I said, well, when now we didn't talk about the West Bank, when they talk about annexing the West Bank, which I think is imminent, the Biden administration would say that's a red line and it violates, UN Resolution 272, I can't remember, and do nothing, wouldn't make any difference, and Trump would embrace it. But for the Palestinians on the ground, there'd be no difference. So, but Biden would too. They're not going to, the Zionists effectively own the U.S. Congress. You have of the people running, believe me, Biden is not running Middle East policy. He probably has a hard time navigating from one room to another in the White House at this point. That's being run by Blinken, a staunch Zionist, by Hochschild, who's served in the IDF, and by Sullivan and by McGurk, who was a disaster in Iraq. So, and that's created, by the way, a great deal of angst within the State Department and even in the U.S. intelligence community among Arabists who actually understand the catastrophic path that these people are leading us down.
Wow. I wish you were in Foggy Bottom. Thanks very much, Chris Hedges of the very famous Chris Hedges report. Let me take a quick break. Then it's Hassan from Manchester and your calls right up until Gayatri's social media roundup. Stay tuned.
A new dawn has broken, has it not?
He had that Clinton thing. His eyes were round and big and smiley, and he was very charming.
He became this incredible pop idol kind of prime minister.
I think most people who have dealt with me think I'm a pretty straight sort of guy, and I am.
New Labour was backed by the most powerful media interests because they realised he was representing them.
He was caught red-handed trading policy in return for hard cash from a businessman.
America has no truer friend than Great Britain.
Both Bush as well as Tony Blair are now wanting to plunge the world into a Holocaust.
JP Morgan paid him off for the Iraq war. The man is a war criminal.
Is Tony Blair a war criminal? In my opinion, yes.
Most definitely.
The pursuit of money has become the dominant theme in your life.
All these relationships are, in most people's estimation, corrupt relationships.
No previous Labour Prime Minister has behaved in this shameful, money-grubbing way.
How do you sleep at night? It's that. It's as a person.
Congratulations to the famous Glasgow Celtic and Manchester United on their outstanding victories today. Let's go to Manchester and talk to Hassan about Iran and Syria. Hassan, welcome to the show. What do you want to say?
Hi, George. How are you doing? Hope you're well.
Thank you. Very good.
I wanted to discuss with you my assessment of the situation, and I was kind of very fearful for many months during this whole the whole genocide, Holocaust, or whatever you want to call it, that at some point there will be something pulled out of the bag. And when the ceasefire happened and then the Syrian issue, Syria collapsed, for me I'm very concerned about what's going to happen in the region now. I'm always looking at a situation where we could be at the start of the Zionist empire, which could last decades, maybe 100 years. We don't know how long it could last, because I'm just looking at the situation, and although the resistance will continue to exist, there's no doubt that its supply lines and its support comes from Iran, and Iran is now in a precarious situation. It's kind of between a rock and a hard place. If it pushes too hard, then it will be hit very hard, and if it doesn't, then the resistance loses. So it's kind of in a tight spot. I was just wondering what your thoughts are in terms of, is there a way out for Iran from the situation, or is it going to have to basically bend the knee to America at some point and say, okay, well, we're going to have to come to some kind of arrangement, which is going to be to the detriment of the resistance to Israel?
Obviously, that debate must exist in Tehran. It must exist within the administration, and it definitely exists without the administration. I've no doubt it's a subject of discussion in the bazaar, in the universities, in the social gatherings and so on. It must. But in a way, the kind of system that the Iranian Islamic State is needs to go forward, or it will go back. It seems to me that if the government, if the state in Iran began to transform itself into just another state in that region, bending the knee to Israel and the United States, the regime would fall. Because if you're going to have that, why have the burden of guys in uniforms and the rather elaborate political structure that exists with a supreme leader and a president and a parliament, but the supreme leader, as the name suggests, being the supreme leader and so on. So I would have thought Iran has to fight. I don't know many Iranians, actually, but those that I know, I think that they will fight. I think it's fight or die. Fight and die, or fight or die. You might as well go out in a blaze of glory, and that's what I think would happen. When Chris Hedges said earlier about boots on the ground in Iran, a country the size of Europe, with 95 million people, the majority of them under 30 years of age, it struck me how monumental a task that would be. The religion is very strong, very deep in Iran, but so is Iranian nationalism. I was at a conference once in Iran, which was an outreach conference to Iranians from around the world, virtually none of whom were even practicing Muslim. But by golly, were the Iranian nationalists. I mean, you've never met a nationalist until you've met an Iranian nationalist. So the confluence or the synthesis of Islam in its revolutionary form and Iranian nationalism, I would have said was bigger, a nut that was much bigger than the Americans and the Israelis could choose. So air attacks it's much more likely to be. And if the Russian air defenses work, and if Iran's ballistic missile technology is as we think it is, and especially if Iran now has the nuclear bomb, well, it all adds up to me to this war's not a good idea. Can we avoid it, please? Because given the geopolitical complications of Iran having Russia and China as its principal allies, and with both of them, but especially with Russia, signed military self-defense agreements, that's pregnant, heavily pregnant with World War III. And why are we doing all this for Netanyahu, who runs a country of 7 million Jewish people on the slopes of the Mediterranean? What's in that for us? Why do we bend backwards, break everything that we supposedly believe in order to upkeep this little settler colonial apartheid state? I genuinely don't get it. Thanks, Hassan. Karim Hazu says, Christian Syrians never fell for the rebels movement. We knew better. Syrians just gave up on Syria to Israel, and now they'll cry all over again. Well, a Christian couple where the husband was beheaded and the wife was shot dead in their home yesterday. They've already been buried with full Christian rites. That funeral was allowed. The new authorities tried to say it was a burglary gone wrong, but it's hard to see how a beheading fits into a burglary. There have been some reports of arrests in Latakia of the religious minorities there from the Alawiyin, the Alawite population, of which the Assad family were a part. And there is this horrific video of the virtually flaying of one of al-Assad's family, his cousin, on the back of a pickup truck this evening. I haven't seen more than that. I've seen some executions, summary field executions. I don't know what the putative reason for them was, whether it was their conduct in the past or whether it was what religion they professed to. Time will tell. It's definitely not been an all-out Taliban-style wipeout of Syrian civil society. Not so far. But all the signs are that that is coming down the pipeline. Anna says only Arafat was a good, patriotic and real Palestinian leader. Look what happened to him and who was responsible. And Sheila Campbell says the whole situation is shocking and shameful. Our world is sick, totally unbelievable that this is being allowed to continue. And Ted Malouf said Turkey didn't have to fight for Palestine, but they don't have to actively support the genocide of the Palestinians either. And Joviano Herran says, quick question, what will be of Venezuela under Trump's new administration? Bearing in mind, he said he wants Venezuela's oil. Well, if I was Venezuela, I'd have a very, very significant Russian and Chinese military presence in the country. Toot damned sweet. Now, if you're watching on TikTok right now, thanks for the 62,000 likes on the live stream. Great to be with you tonight. And let's go to New York, where Pietro wants to talk about Syria. Go ahead, Pietro.
Hi, George. Yes, thank you for having me on again.
Hi.
The most disappointing thing, and going to your sentiments from what you said earlier about, the Arabs are a lost cause, and that's what I believe also. It's not that it doesn't matter who supported these so-called rebels, the Turks, the Americans, the Zionists, right? It's that the Arabs have become susceptible to this Islamist way of thinking, right? It wasn't the demise of Baathism as a party, right, before in Iraq and now in Syria, but the Baathist ideology, this great philosophy by Zaki al-Suzi, right? This great philosopher, this Arab nationalist movement, this secular movement that included, theoretically, that's what they espoused to, right? Like, for the minority, even Zaki al-Suzi and Michel Aflaq, they were of Christian backgrounds, right? But it's this question, why, like, they are happy, like someone mentioned Mohammed Hijab, he's happy with this, like the majority of Arabs now, especially the Sunni Arabs, are happy with this, victory as they see it, right? And it's what happened is, Hassan al-Banna and the Islamists have won. They've won against the secular progressive. Zaki al-Suzi was, inspired by, German and European Enlightenment thinkers and, this new reinvention of the new Arab, just like, Nietzsche would talk about the new European, etc. But why do you think this is? Like, what is so appealing about Islamism in this?
Well, look, they have one. They have one, Pietro. But when are they going to win in the slave Arab countries? They've won in Iraq. They've won in Syria, rather. But when are they going to win in Jordan? When are they going to win in Egypt? When are they going to win in the Gulf countries? Or are they not interested in winning in those countries? You tell me.
I think Jordan is next. I think, it's figures like Ibn Taymiyyah, right? These guys, they are thinkers in their own right, but the way they are, viewed as holy men, and that's what I mean. That the Arab street is ripe for Islamism, right? Whether in Jordan, Egypt, you got to look at Egypt, right? Even the western part of Iraq. This is, is mind-boggling. Like when I read, this dated material, I don't see anything. Even if you go back to what made the Arabs great when we had the Abbasids, it wasn't because of Islam. It was because we had a philosopher king, Al-Ma'mun, who went and went to Egypt, and he measured the pyramids. He did not break the statues like these ISIS and these Salafi jihadists when they go and they destroy even the dead. Even the dead are not safe from their harm. I mean, look what they did to Hafiz al-Assad's grave. They desecrated. So what kind of people do you want to be ruled by, right? And they don't see this. They don't see this. All they want to say, oh, yeah, we have shawarma, and this is, okay, let them make you shawarma. Be happy with your shawarma.
Well, you asked me what's appealing. Well, there's nothing appealing about it to me, which is why I've resigned to concentrate on other matters. Of course, there are millions, tens of millions of great people in the Arab world who want nothing to do with the slave regimes and nothing to do with the fanatic takfiri regime. But the power in the Arab world now, it may change. I pray that it changes. It was not ever thus, and it will not ever be thus. But for the remainder of my lifetime, the Arabs will be divided between these two poles. Socialism is long, long dead in the Arab world. Nasserism, which I have always identified with, Pan-Arabism, standing for Arab unity, the end of the Sykes-Picot bifurcation, balkanization of the Arab world, that's also dead, as a doornail. So you're either with the belly dancing regimes, and millions are, they either are on the take from them, or they're serving the drinks at the belly dancing performances, or they're too afraid to rise up against them, figuring that there might be an easy walk to freedom somehow, which of course, as Mandela told us, there is not. So they're either that, or they are the sectarian fanatics whose interpretation of Islam is all that counts. Other Muslims who don't share that interpretation are takfired, are excommunicated at best, killed at worst, mutilated at worst, never mind the existence of the minority communities from other religions. As you pointed out, Michel Aflaq, the founder of the Arab Ba'ath Socialist Party, was a Christian. And the Arab nationalists are the only people, by definition, who can unite all these different religions and sects in the Arab world. That's obvious. If you're a Sunni Islamist fanatic, takfiri, extremist, well, how could anybody else support you? So they either suffer under you or they'll have to go. My guess is that they're coming to a refugee dinghy near you. The Syrian refugees that are here now, who said they were fleeing al-Assad, virtually none of them will return to Syria. And those who cannot live under ISIS and al-Qaeda will now become refugees. So good luck with that. If you want to stop the boats, you really have to stop the war. So that's my answer, Pietro. Socialism died. Pan-Arabism died. Nasserism died. Baathism died. And all that's left is service of the empire on one side and the ISIS al-Qaeda type mentality on the other. And as I wish to be associated with neither, that's why I'm out of here. Now, as you know, I've got a show on Tuesday nights also called Have It Out with Galloway. Here's how you can appear on it. Watch this. Join me every week to Have It Out with Galloway. We discuss the great issues of the day and occasionally the odd philosophical meandering through the meaning of life. You can be on the show by contacting us at our website, haveitoutwithgalloway.com. You can be the star of the show. Join me on Have It Out with Galloway. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Richard Medhurst is my guest on Have It Out with Galloway on Tuesday night, 7 o'clock on my YouTube channel. Please watch it, but even more importantly, join it. Get on the website now, haveitoutwithgalloway.com, and register to be on the video wall. Then you, not me, not Richard, you could be the star of the show. Abdi is on the line from the United States, in Minnesota, in fact, and he wants to talk about Syria. Abdi, welcome to the show.
George, thank you so very much. You have to forgive me. I've been sitting at the back of the class lately.
Okay, don't worry.
So, George, first of all, I wanted to follow up with your monologue entrance and you resigning. And I just wanted to console you, to tell you that we loved you when you were with the Democrats. We love you now when you are with the Trumpisters and the, should I call, the right wing, as you used to call it. And we loved you every time, no matter what. You have educated us for so long, and we learned a lot from you. I would like you to just forget about those, the side callers, what I call, that just try to either get under your skin or don't have the same, philosophies as you do. But have you ever seen a professor that was liked by the whole class?
No.
I guess no.
No, a very good point, Abdi, and it's advice that my good wife is even now giving me on an hourly basis. I've wasted far too much time in the last 2 days answering and replying and arguing with people who are not worthy of being argued with. So from now on, I'll restrict myself to the 3 shows that I have on, and such work as I do in the streets and on social media will be much more focused on other matters than the matters I've spent the last 50 years specializing in. Back to you, Abdi. What's your take on how things are going?
My take is, to be honest with you, sometimes the coin has 2 sides. I understand you and others who say, why are you smiling? Why are you laughing? You have given this whole country to Israel. But if I can piggyback on the idea that Trevor, who was before me earlier from Manchester, I believe, said it, General Wesley Clark in 2000, whatever it was, 11, have told us the memo that they have produced it. They said, we're going to take out 8 Islamic countries, starting with Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Somalia, Sudan, and so forth. And if you look right now, the political situation that's going on, there is no country with those 8 that they mentioned that there's no flames going on it. That was a strategic long-term that they built it on themselves, and they are using this, what I call the boogeyman, Israel, to carry out this. Of course, what I call Netanyahu is not calming down. He wants to take Syria and those other ones that you mentioned earlier that are thinking, oh, we are safe. We are with the program. They are not safe. He is coming to them, whether they know it or they don't know it. So my point is, the Syrians that are right now in Syria, I rejoice with them. All the hell they caught from this family for 50 years, for once, let them enjoy. Let them say it's out. God knows what is going to happen later on. We know already the Israelis are pushing through Syria. They have dismantled all their power, all everything. But as you know, they are finding out that Iran and Russia were also using this boogie name called ISIS, or so-called fanatics, if you want, you put it. They were using the same flag. They were using, and Russia was using, and Ukraine was using the flag. So this boogeyman that the West have already created is something that's going to wait Iran to be attacked to in 2025 or even beyond. They're going to make up with some other crap that's related to this, the Shiites, whatever they will call it later on. I don't want to predict the future, but I guarantee you they will come up with some sort of things to attack Iran too. So this boogeyman called Islamist or
most
ISIS
people
or
on our poll definitely agree with you on that, Abdi. Thanks for that spirited call from what will be an ice-cold Minnesota this December night, I am sure. My good wife joins me now in the studio. What's rattling, Gayatri?
So we are asking tonight whether Israel will attack Iran in 2025. And earlier you had a call and responded upon the nationalism amongst the Iranian people, which is unbeatable. And I concur. There's no such thing. I mean, I think I'm nationalistic. I think Indonesians are, but we don't compare it to the Iranians, obviously, because they come from greatness. They come from the Persian Empire that ruled so many years, so many centuries ago. But on the other hand, the Turkish also have a very curious sense of nationality. I've never been to Turkey. I've only transited at the airport, but even when I'm at the airport in the transit halls, you see flags of Erdogan, of Ataturk, and their nationalism, same, like amongst all the sects and religions and different kinds of people, pro and against Erdogan, they're very, very nationalistic. And I think that's...
Although, Gayatri, that's partly because Erdogan's Muslim Brotherhood profile slipped so dangerously low that he only just won the last presidential election. So he's trying to add to his Muslim Brotherhood profile. He's trying to drape himself in Turkish nationalism. He didn't used to be like that.
Well, I grew up with lots of Turks in the Netherlands, and I can tell Turkish have always been nationalistic, because they obviously had the Ottoman Empire as well, and that's the theme of the night. And I promised I would bring you some maps. I even brought the globe with me tonight. I want to start with this Ottoman Empire.
The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. That's the kind of globe I like.
This is an old globe that we found in one of these flea markets. I forgot where. But let's look at the Ottoman Empire height in the late 17th century. You can see that it stretches all the way into the Maghreb, North Africa, all the way into East Europe. It was humongous. And then by 1914, by the end of World War I, it was downsized all the way to just the Levant and Arabia. And I've got a very reliable source for that. It comes from no other than the BBC, which reflects on the Ottoman Empire, and on the back of it, the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Because on the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the Brits and the French were very worried that the Arabs couldn't look after themselves. So they had to be looked after, and so they had to create these lands for them. And so they obviously they did so, cutting the lines in the sand. They did so regardless of the tribe, the religion, everything that was in between. So,
well, the division of Iraq and Kuwait, for example, my late and great friend Tam Dalyell, Member of Parliament, his father was in the tent when the line with a stick was drawn in the sand. Everyone was arguing, this walayat, and the British resident, I forget his name, Percy someone, literally took a stick and said, enough. He drew a line in the sand. He said, this is Iraq, this is Kuwait. That's how capricious it all was.
Yeah, exactly. And then, as you can see, we then have what people have recently more often referred to as the Greater Israel that goes across it as well. And among all of this is that Syria is right in the middle of it. We have a map of that as well. I hope that will come on the screen very soon, just to show the pictures.
There is, yeah.
Well, that's the Greater Israel map. And Syria under Bashar al-Assad was just inconveniently in the way. But now with that gone,
the sky's the limit.
The sky's the limit. If it's possible to show the map of the Sykes-Picot on the screen, would be great. But otherwise, we'll get back to it later, and we'll just go on to
the... your studies are, as I said earlier, going into overdrive. Anything else you want to say?
So, just in response to the poll, Eamon McManus says, I wouldn't be surprised if it happened over Christmas while the world stops to watch TV. We have some amongst them. And Paul Batson, our comrade, says, why bother when they can simply pay their jihadi proxies in Syria to do that for him?
I don't know. Iran's a tougher nut to crack. My own view, as I said on Wednesday, is that Iraq will be attacked first. That ISIS and Al-Qaeda, after a period of rejoicing on whatever beverage it is that they rejoice with, when they recover from that, they will get on their pickup trucks, get on their jeeps, and they will head for Iraq. There's a lot of murder and mayhem that they can create in Iraq, and that is, of course, a dagger at the heart of Iran.
Yeah, because that was showing in the map that I wanted to show during the Sykes-Picot, because they just cut the line across the Kurds and Mesopotamia, and obviously this left the Kurds without a state, and this has caused perpetual
misery for the Kurdish people, which ain't going to end anytime soon. Thanks, Gayatri, for that. We'll take one more call from Erobos in New York on Syria and the Arab resistance. Erobos, the legend in New York. Welcome.
Salutations and greetings and a salubrious late evening to you, the mother of all talk shows, the global university for which education is free. And that wonderful, insightful sykespicot presentation done by the fabulous Miss Gayatri Galloway in her most elegant Chuan Fa Wu Fu boxing elegant outfit. You mentioned earlier,
I was thinking that too,
refrain. Yes. You mentioned earlier that your common refrain that I was pondering on even prior, so it's a salubrious synchronicity there of the fish rotting from the head down. And some of this blame, if not most of the blame, has to be placed on Bashar al-Assad and he turned down economic guarantees and overtures of credit stimulus windows from China and Russia, which would have helped. It would have destroyed the Caesar sanctions and made them irrelevant. He turned those down. He turned down the opportunity once the north of Gaza was cleared by the Palestinian resistance to then clear out the Golan and return it back to Syria. So he made errors in judgment, not mistakes. He made particular and specific errors in judgment, and why the generals didn't overthrow him like Burkina Faso, Mali, and our brothers there in Niger. Time will tell the tale. I guess that's where the corruption part in. However, that's just my little quick preamble because, in this world historic moment, I had to say something about it. The reason, in my view, of why the axis of resistance, not just in its current form, but from the beginning, and I'll go back to the first Intifada, is the way that they fight. I think they're doomed. Fighting, I've come to accept, the whole point of fighting is to win. It is not a moral exercise. It is not an exercise of religion or philosophy. The whole purpose of a struggle is to become victorious. And the problem with the axis of resistance, even in its earlier incarnations, is they're fighting a moral war against an immoral enemy. I don't know about anyone else, but anyone who, if I had children, or even if there's somebody else's children that I care about, and I was in the power to do something, anybody that murders my family, my children, blows up my neighborhood, schools, hospitals, I will do unto them as they done unto me. That's what it says in the Old Testament. And even if it doesn't say that, that's. So I think this measured way that they're fighting, this sort of, okay, our religion says we shouldn't do this and we shouldn't do that. The enemy already knows how to respond beyond their limitations. Malcolm X said, I don't have to tell you about Malcolm X, but anyone that adopts and I'm just paraphrasing, anyone that adopts the rules of their enemy to fight has already lost. Right? Fighting by the rules of your enemy is a fool's game. And I'm an April Fool, but I'm not a complete idiot. So I think it's time at some point, I don't know how many of their sons they're going to give, but they have a finite number of sons, right? They don't have infinite sons to give. At some point, they're going to realize if this, and I'll just finish with this, because I don't want to rant on forever. If this was done in the first Intifada, if Israel knew that their children were going to be destroyed, their hospitals, their families were going to be destroyed, the same way they destroyed the Palestinians, the indigenous Palestinians, Palestinian Arabs, and surrounding countries, there wouldn't even been an Intifada. It would have been like, okay, these people are not playing. We're not going to mess with them. We're going to mess with somebody else. But, they know, the Zionists know that it's only so far the resistance are going to go, right? And then you see Hamas celebrating their lineage with the Muslim Brotherhood. So I just wanted to give this perspective, because if they don't modify their way of fighting, I don't think they're ever going to win. And that's just me. That's just my perspective. And I'm just thankful for the opportunity to present it. Amen.
Well, you did so very powerfully indeed, and but for the hour, I'd respond in very great detail indeed, because many of the things that you are saying about the strategy, tactics, of struggle against the empire in conflictual situations, in times of war, are things that I am myself endlessly now thinking about. But time is against me. I'll say only this. There cannot be another example in history like the example of Hamas, which lived in Syria, based in Syria, trained in Syria, armed through Syria, funded by Syria, dinners by Syria, who ratted then re-ratted, only for the Syrian regime promptly to fall. This is a hopelessly compromised situation that they now find themselves in. I would not, in the past, have openly discussed this matter, but now I must. When the Hamas turned on their Syrian host, they believed, presumably, that the revolutionaries were going to prevail. When they did not prevail, Syria was, the Hamas was up the river without a paddle. They were up a gum tree. They would not be welcome in any other Arab country, be sure of that. Even the Gulf satrapies that fund them would not have been prepared to base them, host them. Their leaders would not have been welcome there except for a short hotel stay, but not a long one. So when the Syrian regime prevailed, they were nowhere. They had no fixed abode, as you might say. So just before October 7th, they went back to Damascus and they apologized to Bashar al-Assad's regime and to Hezbollah for the role that they had played in the Syrian war, which they must have thought was dead and buried. And then Golani destroys the Bashar al-Assad regime, and Hamas are up a gum tree again. Golani has closed their office, told their fighters they must disarm, actually has now begun to disarm them. There's no political factions amongst the Palestinian refugee population, 1 million strong or more. They will not be allowed to do anything other than charity work, Golani has said. They must hand in their weapons. They must disband their militias. And that Syria will never again be in a conflict with Israel. They, according to Golani, intend to have a neutral position vis-a-vis the state of Israel next door, which crushes the Palestinian people, which steals Syrian and Palestinian land, and which has committed genocide and has no intention of stopping. How can you be neutral about that, yet claim that you are an Islamist? So either they will remain neutral, as Golani said, or they will not, or there will be breakaways within their Islamist factions from Islamist fighters who cannot bear to be neutral on this subject. And that brings up Chris Hedges' earlier point that it's hard to understand Israeli exaltation. Syria next door becoming Al-Qaeda central with its own state. It's hard to understand, if you've read Frankenstein all the way to the end, how they think that they can, in all circumstances and for all time, stay in control of that. So this story is not over. There are no final victories, and there are no final defeats. There are only cycle after cycle after cycle of struggle. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. There are dramatic events unfolding in the world. The most dramatic may yet unfold, rendering all these discussions odious in the context of World War III and nuclear holocaust and the extinction of the human race. Maybe that's what these UFOs are buzzing around to indicate to us, that the end is nigh. There used to be a man walked up and down Oxford Street who blamed the rise of peanuts for the sickness of the human condition. And on one side of his placard, it used to say, the end is nigh. I hope it's not nigh, but if it is, it will not have been a placard in Oxford Street that was the harbinger of the end of times. It would be these weird, interplanetary, unidentified flying objects that appear to be everywhere, including outside this studio this evening. My apologies for any shortcomings in the transmission. I hope you will say that you enjoyed the show and that you will tell others about it. See, the thing about me is, now that I've reached 5 million viewers, I want to keep it there, and I need your help to do that. Please bring another viewer with you by Wednesday for the midweek edition of the Mother of All Talk Shows. Good night.